former immigration detainee released by the High Court, wrongfully arrested on sex charges. The ultimate betrayal, revelations of a retired politician being recruited by international spies. The days of writing a cheque come to an end, making the way for new financial technologies. And Cameron Green racks up his second Test century on day one of the first Test between Australia and New Zealand in Wellington. Hello and welcome to ABC Late News. I'm Jade Barker. Police in Victoria have apologised for wrongfully arresting a former immigration detainee on sex offences. After announcing they charged the detainee over a spate of assaults in Melbourne, police later said they got the wrong man. He's one of 149 people released from detention in a High Court ruling last year.
Word travels quickly through Parliament House.
My question is to the Minister for Immigration.
Particularly when it's about the alleged behaviour of an individual recently released into the community.
Charged with sexual assault, stalking and 2 counts of unlawful assault in Victoria.
Yesterday, police arrested a man who they said was one of the 149 people set free following last year's High Court ruling that indefinite immigration detention for people who can't be deported was unlawful. He appeared in the Melbourne Magistrates Court today, not once, but twice. The charges dropped this afternoon, with police confirming they'd got the wrong guy. A local man not connected to the released detainees, now the person of interest.
With further evidence, it is clear the person arrested is not the offender, and for that we are sincerely sorry that this person has been detained.
The development coming well after the Coalition had sought to make political mileage out of it in question time.
Why did the Minister fail to use his powers to seek to re-detain this serial sex offender and protect these 2 Victorian women?
I'm not in a position, and I will not comment on any individual case because I will not risk prejudice any court proceedings.
The opposition weaponising the issue ahead of this weekend's by-election in the Melbourne seat of Dunkley. The deputy opposition leader posting on social media, "If you live in Frankston and you've got a problem with Victorian women being assaulted by foreign criminals, vote against Labor." Susan Lee's office isn't retreating from that sentiment in light of this embarrassing blunder by Victorian police, arguing there's a broader issue at play with how the government has handled the release of this group. And ahead of the Dunkley poll, it's banking on the community feeling the same. Despite Labor's insistence, it's done all it can to keep them safe. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
A cloud of suspicion hangs over former politicians following the revelation one has helped spy for a foreign country. The head of ASIO says the person sold out their country by joining a secret influence operation. But with no name and no clarity on whether they were a federal or state MP, the opposition and others are demanding details. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
Inside a building of secrets,
welcome to ASIO.
A tantalising glimpse into a clandestine overseas spy ring.
Right now, there is a particular team in a particular foreign intelligence service with a particular focus on Australia.
The ASIO boss revealing how operatives dubbed the A-Team successfully cultivated a former Member of Parliament several years ago.
This politician sold out their country, party, former colleagues to advance the interests of a foreign regime.
With attempted infiltration into the highest levels of government.
At one point, the former politician even proposed bringing a Prime Minister's family member into the spy's orbit.
But when challenged to identify the unnamed culprit...
I'm not going to name the individual. We're a rule of law country.
Instead, Mike Burgess noted that tougher foreign interference laws had been passed since this episode.
Personally, I don't think they'll be stupid enough to repeat what they've done in the past.
The intelligence chief says his decision to publicly call out the A-Team is part of a real-world, real-time disruption, letting the foreign spies know that their activities here have been uncovered. But his decision to not identify the former politician is generating a furious guessing game inside this building, as well as demands for more information.
The former politician who sold out this country could be in this building right now. Why won't you name the traitor now?
It's a matter for the Director-General of ASIO. If he was to choose to name that.
I've said I have a fair idea, and I'm being careful about what I say publicly because of that.
There absolutely would be benefit, though, in ensuring that not all former politicians carry some sort of smear or smirch upon them.
Let's not get offended because we're talking about national security matters. It is clearly in the national interest for this to be the subject of national discussion.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a great pleasure.
A very public discussion of work that's usually hidden in the shadows. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
The Therapeutic Goods Administration will move to ban compounding pharmacists from making their own versions of injectable weight loss drugs like Ozempic and Mounjaro. The drugs are approved for diabetes and widely used off-label for weight loss, which has led to supply problems and shortages in Australia. That enabled Australian pharmacists to use a regulatory loophole to replicate the drugs and supply them to customers with a prescription. The TGA has unveiled a proposal to immediately stop pharmacists from being able to compound the types of drugs used in the brand name medications. The move is due to concerns they're being compounded at high volumes and that compounded products may not be safe and effective. Authorities have narrowed down the list of Queensland businesses potentially exposed to mulch containing asbestos. 16 landscaping companies received the potentially contaminated material from a stockpile of compost from New Grow in Ipswich, with customers being urged to contact authorities. 3 schools have also received some of the mulch, but the areas are construction sites and not accessible to students, staff or the general public. Experts say the likely airborne spread of the fibres is extremely low as the mulch is moist. More exposure sites are expected to be found.
But the extent of the sites that we've found and the fact that we have stopped distribution through many of those landscape and haulage companies gives me some hope that the list won't grow significantly.
Shareholders in Zip, a buy now, pay later company, are up in arms over a recent decision by the company to on-sell their shares. A week before the sale process was announced, 2 directors picked up a swag of shares on the market. They have since reaped the benefits while smaller shareholders missed out.
It was once a rising star in financial services. Now Zip, the buy now, pay later hopeful, is facing the ire of shareholders who claim they were forced to sell out when the share price was at a 7-year low.
It was an initiative that was a few months in the planning.
The week before the sale plan was announced, the company's chair, Diane Smith-Gander, and another director, Meredith Scott, bought a substantial amount of stock. They complied with the rules, but many small investors feel they were unfairly treated because they have missed out.
I think the purchase of shares by the key executives was a demonstration that they believed in the future of the company and a strong signal to shareholders.
Zip announced the sale plan in October for shareholders who held less than $500 worth of stock. The catch, if shareholders didn't want to sell their shares, they had to opt out by November 20. The ABC has spoken to some shareholders who said the communication wasn't clear. Many only knew their shares had been sold after they disappeared from their brokerage accounts. The company argues these investors were given adequate notice.
Investors were very well informed.
But of the 78,000 affected investors, almost 70,000 had their shares sold. They were paid just over 40 cents a share. Since then, the price has more than doubled. Corporate watchdog ASIC says it has had a small number of complaints about alleged misconduct over the notice, but there was no evidence the company broke the listing rules. ASIC says there's room for companies to make it more clear to investors what action needs to be taken to retain their shares. But the Australian Securities Exchange says the rules won't be changed. Nassim Khadem, ABC News.
The federal government will phase out cheques by 2030 in favour of a more modern financial system. But banks are already well ahead of that timeline, and one bank will no longer process cheques from this week. Older and lower income people feel they're being left behind as banking moves online.
Pensioner Michael Coogan uses cheques to pay his rent.
We don't do any banking online because we're not familiar enough with computers. Computers don't figure largely in our lives.
Banks say cheques are costly to process, even more so as fewer people use them. It's a cost that'll shift now to Mr Coogan when his bank stops issuing cheques this week, and he'll have to begin paying a fee to pay rent.
Every cent counts. And to all those 33-year-olds and 34-year-olds out there, one day you will be 43 and 53 and 63 and you'll discover that your income shrinks.
National Seniors Australia fear vulnerable people will be left behind as banking goes digital.
So the banks have got to really just make sure that, you know, as a system, that they are providing support to the entire community, not just the cohort that have mortgages.
The use of cheques has dropped 90% in the past decade, now making up less than 1% of all transactions. The federal government admits phasing out cheques will affect older and lower income Australians, but has promised an inclusive, gradual shift. Tenants Queensland is worried the end of cheques will push more people onto fee-charging third-party platforms.
In effect, the agents are subcontracting their rent collection requirements and also cost shifting onto the tenant. It just makes sense that you shouldn't be charged for paying your rent.
The Australian Banking Association says its members are supporting customers to transition to easier, more accessible ways to pay.
I'm not comfortable with it. I know by the number of cheques, other people aren't comfortable with it.
But they'll soon have to get used to it. Jessica Black, ABC News.
The US Supreme Court has agreed to hear Donald Trump's claim he should be immune from prosecution on charges of trying to overturn the 2020 election. The Conservative Majority Court will hear arguments in April, a move which calls into question whether the case could go to trial before the November election. At the same time, an Illinois judge barred the former president from appearing on the state's primary ballot because of his role in the January 6 Capitol riot. But she delayed her ruling due to the Supreme Court hearing. It came as one of the most powerful figures in US politics, Mitch McConnell, announced he was stepping down, potentially ceding more influence to Donald Trump and Republican hardliners.
To lead my Republican colleagues has been the highest privilege. But one of life's most underappreciated talents is to know when it's time to move on to life's next chapter.
US regulators have issued aircraft manufacturer Boeing a 90-day ultimatum to address systemic quality control issues. The Federal Aviation Administration's directive follows a year-long inquiry which found measures taken by Boeing to address safety concerns aren't working. The reliability of Boeing aircraft has again come under scrutiny after a door plug blew out mid-air during an Alaska airline flight in early January. The FAA has halted production of the Boeing 737 MAX while an investigation is completed. Virgin Australia and Bonsai Airlines flew the new MAX iteration of the 737 in Australia. While Australians grapple with a cost of living crisis, for many young Japanese, moving down under is a financial boon. Plagued with low wages and economic hardships, Japan is now officially in recession. So Japanese workers are flocking to Australia in record numbers.
Armed with a small camera, Shoma Tanaka talks candidly to his social media followers about his earnings, expenses and, most importantly, savings.
It is definitely easier to work in Australia. The hours are less than in Japan and the pay is higher in my case, so it's much easier mentally.
Since arriving in 2019, he's worked a variety of jobs. Currently, he's at a metalworks factory, earning twice what he would back home. On his YouTube channel, Shoma explains how the higher income, combined with a bit of frugality, has helped him save $200,000 and buy his dad a new car.
If there are people who are working and feeling a bit frustrated in Japan, I'd like to let them know that there is a path to choose, a working holiday, and there are possibilities for them.
Japan has slipped into recession as the country battles a weak yen and an ageing, shrinking population.
I feel the cost of food is going up, and I'm shocked how much the power and gas bills cost lately.
I'd like to give more and more back to my employees. However, in reality, while the cost of goods and expenses are rising, it's impossible.
The number of Japanese applying to work in Australia has hit record levels as people seek sanctuary from low, stagnant wages.
There is a very strong incentive for Japanese people to, work outside for a certain period and earn money and then come back.
It's not all bad news. Major Japanese firms are posting record profits and the stock market is back to all-time highs. What many workers here want to know is when this good news will flow through to their wallets.
I'm worried about my life. From my point of view, Japan is declining.
Those economic headwinds may take a long time to subside. James Oaten, ABC News, Tokyo.
Prince Harry has lost his High Court challenge to the removal of his police protection when he visits the UK. The Duke of Sussex went to court 4 years ago after the government downgraded his security status when he stopped being a working royal. His lawyers claimed he'd been singled out and treated less favourably than other members of the royal family.
From birth, he has had a shadow, police protection, clearing the way and watching his back. But that doesn't come cheap. And when he and Meghan stepped back from royal duties and left the country, that automatic protection was withdrawn. That hurt, something he made clear when he told his side of the story.
Em asked me, would they remove our security? I said, they'll never do that. Meghan's background, her heritage, the well-documented hate campaigns against us, suspicious packages being sent to the palaces, specifically with her name on or my name on. She said, do you think they'll ever do it? I said, no, they would never do that. And they did it.
There would be times, like the late Queen's Jubilee, when back in the UK he would get protection, but it would be decided on a case-by-case basis. He went to court to challenge that decision. In court, Prince Harry's lawyers said that the way the decision had been made to deny him police protection was wrong, that the prince should have been able to argue his own case for himself. And they said that the people who made the decision should have considered the impact of any successful attack on Harry on the reputation of the country. But the court rejected all of that. The people who replace the police guarding Harry will have a tougher job.
With police protection, with armed protection, you have immediate access to intelligence and information, and you can also tell the public to move over there, don't park that car there. So the private team has a much more difficult task before them.
Today, Harry was speaking up on behalf of one of his British charities. His legal team says he will appeal the court's decision.
Fake fashion can be found everywhere, from influencers on social media to the person next to you at the shops. In Europe, nearly a third of 15 to 24-year-olds have knowingly bought a counterfeit item. And while buying a fake might seem innocent, it's been linked to funding organised crime such as human trafficking and terrorism.
In the city of Manchester in the UK, a specialist task force has made a massive discovery. A multi-million-dollar designer fashion counterfeiting factory right in the heart of the city.
We knew that the things were being imported and some were being manufactured locally, but we've realised it was on a much larger scale.
Every room of the factory is packed with fake designer clothes. They were being sold all over the UK.
You know, they've got quite sophisticated setups where they'll be selling stuff left, right and centre all day. Banging it out of mine.
And this is an item that someone submitted to us.
Ben Gallagher's a luxury fashion authenticator. He's seen an increase in the number of fakes being submitted to his business.
So let's have a little look at them. I think the rise of fakes is definitely increasing at a very fast rate.
While buying a fake might seem innocent, there's a bigger reason why the police are worried. Counterfeiting is now one of the largest sources of criminal income worldwide, with estimates of its value in the trillions.
I've never seen any organised crime groups as organised and developed as these groups are. To be able to move tons, we're talking metric tons of goods.
The money from these sales can fund some of the most serious crimes, ranging from human trafficking to terrorism.
So we know Hezbollah has used it heavily, and first they sell counterfeits and counterfeit fashion. We've seen it with IRA.
Those investigating the crime are encouraging buyers to think about the hidden cost of owning a fake.
Think about what it took to get this product here to you in front of you, and what will be done to the money that you have just given a criminal. What will he do with your money?
Naomi Selvaratnam, ABC News.
Cameron Green's century has prevented New Zealand from dismissing Australia for a modest total on day one of the first test in Wellington. Green thrived in difficult batting conditions and reached his second test century shortly before stumps.
Tails. The home team won the toss and had no hesitation in bowling on a green-tinged pitch.
Not too upset with that. Yeah, seems like there's been some first inning scores that have been big, so that's the aim today.
A rare visit to New Zealand from the Australian Test team led to a sold-out crowd at the Basin Reserve.
Isn't that a gorgeous picture?
Australia's openers survived some anxious moments.
Hasn't carried through to Tom Latham at second slip.
The Usman Khawaja-Steve Smith combination was still finding its feet.
They weren't awake to it, New Zealand. They weren't awake to it.
With lunch approaching, the Black Caps finally made a breakthrough.
New Zealand have their first. What a catch from Blundell, and it's Matt Henry.
Marnus Labuschagne's run of low scores in tests continued as New Zealand's pace attack dominated.
Oh, yes! What a ripper from Henry. He's got one to swing, and he's got it to swing late.
Travis Head came and went.
There it is.
Allan Border medalist Mitch Marsh decided attack was the best approach, but it brought about his undoing on 40.
High on the ban, it's a big wicket.
Another West Australian all-rounder stood tall.
Finds the gap. That's a lovely shot.
With wickets tumbling, Green accelerated to his century.
That is 4, that is 100, his second in test matches. What a sensational knock this has been. Cam Green, take a bow.
Just one of those days, and I think someone just needed to bat through, so yeah, I was glad it was me.
Australia ended a hard-fought day with Green unconquered, but only one wicket in hand. Duncan Huntsdale, ABC News.
Rejuvenated Matildas striker Michelle Heyman is proving that age is just a number, with her 4-goal blitz against Uzbekistan rocketing her into Olympics contention. The 35-year-old's performance was the exclamation mark in the Australians' 10-0 drumming of the Uzbeks in Melbourne on Wednesday night, handing coach Tony Gustafsson's even tougher task of selecting the squad for Paris.
After a night to remember for Michelle Heyman, you could barely wipe the smile off her face.
So it was just a really sweet moment to be able to, score a 4. Just wild.
Heyman says the past week has been an emotional roller coaster. 5 years after retiring from international football, the veteran's comeback couldn't have gone better.
A lot of people told me that I couldn't do it, you're too old. So it's really nice to be able to show people that it doesn't matter how old you are.
Heyman's heroics helped the Matildas book a ticket to Paris. The real test will come against the world's best.
Can she bring the pressing intensity and the game out on the field when you have less time and space?
But I do believe in my ability, and I know how hard I've been pushing myself to, get here, but I'm not stopping.
Opportunities ahead of the Olympics will be thin. Australia plays Mexico in April before 2 yet-to-be-announced send-off matches in June.
When we go to governments these days and say there's a Matildas match, they get snapped up pretty quickly. So hopefully it's in a few different cities.
And competition for spots will be fierce. The squad must be cut from 23 to 18.
It's always been cutthroat, and I think that's the nature of, the Matildas setup.
Gustafsson says creating chemistry is key.
So when I select a squad for Olympics, I might leave some players out of that roster that is better individually, but it's about building the best team.
Katrina Gorry has hinted the Olympics could be her farewell.
For most of us, it's probably, could be our last major tournament. So I think, to go out with a bang would be pretty amazing for all of us.
Gorry looking to the future.
Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Alongside her daughter, Harper. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Perth Wildcats will play the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers in their best of 3 NBL semi-final series. The Wildcats haven't played for 2 weeks since finishing second in the regular season. The Jack Jumpers beat Illawarra in a one-off elimination match on Wednesday, setting up Game 1 against the Wildcats in Perth on March the 8th. Wildcats guard Ben Henschel says knowing their opponent will help prepare them.
We know who we're playing now, so we can adjust practices to get ready to defend some guys. But no, yeah, it's definitely good to know who we're playing.
Fremantle will be without a host of first-choice players for Friday's pre-season clash with Port Adelaide. Jai Amiss has a corked leg, while Luke Jackson has concussion, both injuries sustained in last week's practice match win over West Coast. Michael Frederick and Nathan O'Driscoll were also injured and won't play. Recruit Jeremy Sharp will line up in his first game for the club, named on the wing. Let's get a check now of the weather. Here's Eleni Roussos.
There's plenty of cloud covering the north of the country, where we've seen some really big rainfall totals in excess of 200 millimetres in far north Queensland. Patchy cloud also covers parts of WA and in the southeast. A cold front brushes the coast of New South Wales, not quite strong enough to reach inland parts of the state where it's been very hot and humid. A trough over WA could bring rain for Perth in time for the long weekend. Let's see how our Friday's looking in Queensland. More rain for the tropics. It will stay hot in the south. A warm day for Brisbane, topping 31. In New South Wales, hot in the northern inland, storms for central and northeastern districts. A warm day for Sydney, 30. Dry and mostly sunny in Victoria. The far northwest could get some rain. A cloudy day for Melbourne, topping 26. Fine over Tasmania. Showers about the west. Hobart, you could get a shower at night, 24 the top tomorrow. Southeasterly winds picking up through South Australia tomorrow. It will stay very hot in the north, 29 degrees for Adelaide. In the west, mostly settled conditions, except in the far south and the far north, where it will stay wet, a top of 34 in Perth. And up north, showers and storms throughout the Northern Territory, 33 at the top for Darwin.
And that's ABC Late News for now. For more news at any time, though, you can head to our website at news.abc.net.au, or you can catch up on ABC iView. I'm Jade Barker. Thanks for your company.